Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second session of our four-part speaker series for Love, Faith, and Bold Action. You may or may not know me. I work with Stephen. I'm a learning technologist for the United Church, obviously. For this session, we're going to have two live interpreters for Spanish, English and Spanish, obviously. If you require interpretation, there is a button either at the bottom of your screen or the top, depending on how your Zoom is set up. So you will select the interpretation button, either at the bottom, as I said. You'll select English or Spanish from that menu. Speakers are encouraged to speak slowly and clearly for live translation. For those who may have hearing challenges, closed captioning is also available using the closed captioning feature at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on your Zoom panel. We are recording the webinar and it will be available at ChurchX. This may take a while as we are recording in different languages. So be prepared for the week of the 26th if you need to watch this again. Please use the chat to input any questions. There will also be an opportunity for Q&A sessions. Please ensure also you are on mute while the presenters are speaking. This really helps with the recording, and it also helps with others as they are trying to listen to the speakers. So please select your language. Again, it's the interpretation selection. You may have to select more at the bottom of your screen. If you select more interpretation, you should have two options there, English and Spanish. If for any reason the interpreters are on the wrong channel, which I doubt because they're pros, I'll stop the session to ensure the correct language is being spoken on the correct channel. So with that, I will pass it now to Jane to do the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Andrea. Hi, everybody. My name is Jhon Botia. I'm the programs coordinator, the 2S LGBTQ+ program at the United Church of Canada. Thank you and welcome to today's webinar. I'm honored to serve as co-moderator for tonight's webinar, Building Inclusive Faith Spaces, Lessons from Latin America's Ecumenical Movement. And tonight we amplify the powerful voices of two LGBTQA+ Christian leaders from Latin America who are reshaping faith communities from the inside out. I would like to begin today's session with a land acknowledgement. We begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on lands that have long been cared for by Indigenous peoples. In Canada, we recognize the many territories where United Church people live and serve. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. I am currently in the treaty territory belonging to 6 nations of the Grand River. I would also like to acknowledge Indigenous ancestors who were the original caretakers of this land. We have much to remember. However, we are thankful to be able to meet and learn together in their territories. Other nations from across the Americas and other peoples from around the world have been invited into this territory in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. With great sadness, we acknowledge the violence and injustice practiced by so many settlers in the past and even today. Many of the newcomers are without land as they have been displaced by colonialism, war, poverty, or political repression, and many lands remain contested by colonial interests, including in Colombia and in Mexico. And we commit to gathering in deep gratitude, respect, and shared hope for the future. I would now like to introduce my colleague, Christy, who will help us with the introductions with tonight's guests.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. And it's an even greater pleasure to be able to introduce our two speakers this evening from the LGBTQIA movement in Latin America and partners of the United Church of Canada. I'll introduce our first speaker, Mónica Álvarez, who is the Secretary of the World Student Christian Federation of Latin America and the Caribbean. Mónica is a youth leader, lesbian, feminist, and passionate ecumenical advocate. She is leading the development and implementation of FUMEC, which is the World Student Christian Federation's acronym in Spanish. FUMEC's inclusive gender justice and inclusion policy for good living, a visionary roadmap for equal rights across the region. And then we'll also hear, after Monica speaks, Pastor Jhon Botia. He is the first openly gay pastor consecrated in a Methodist church in Latin America. And Pastor Jhon will share with us their journey of affirmation, resistance, and bold reimagining of church as a space of belonging for queer people in Colombia. So just want to invite you to welcome them into this virtual space of community for this evening. And I'm going to pass without greater more words, open the space up to Monica to begin her presentation with us this evening. Welcome to this space.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you very much, Christy. Thank you very much, all the United Church of Canada, for inviting us to this space. It's an honor to be here. Well, as it was mentioned, I come from a foundation, from the Federation. It's the World Christian Student Federation. It includes all the Latin America and the Caribbean region. Uh, Nowadays, we're having a dialogue about diversity, sexual and gender identity diversity. Thanks to this, we're nowadays working on several projects. We're working towards a more just, a fair world for people who have different sexual orientations. Nowadays, we have student communities, we have different youth, LGBTQ youth are participating. They're talking about gender matters. And in Brazil, we had a meeting. There's a picture here. We we talked about queer theology from a youth perspective. These are some of the participants. We have had several meetings about the topic. In the same way, our communities in Mexico and in Cuba are very interested. They're also interested in uh, advocacy about the women's participations. There have there have been several approaches to the topic. So these meetings range from different spaces. We have feminist liberating queer theologies to activism spaces. When activism has to do with rights affirmation, and also for nation states, and we want to build liberated communities aligning with these lines of actions that we're actually working within the Federation. We were also building our policy, uh, gender justice policy. This gender justice policy is the first one within the Federation worldwide. In Latin America and in the Caribbean, we're very happy to have been able to build this space. This is testament to the region's real commitment when it comes to the rights of gender rights. It also shows the previous work that the Federation has been doing. We have spiritual spaces and activism spaces. So from then on, that gender justice policy takes into account ancestral wisdom from of indigenous communities in all Latin America and Caribbean to live well. This invites us to reflect on our relationship with nature. We are on an equal relationship. So we have to understand gender and gender justice. Through this, we're doing something political. The Christian student movements are working on this. That's something we need to do to commit ourselves to our territories. We want to eradicate colonialism and spirituality. We want to work on our spirituality. On the screen, I'm showing our inclusion policy regarding gender diversity. Diane Martinez, she was the one who was in charge of that gender policy, and then I took on from there. And finally, the objective of this advertising campaign first, uh, how we were going to um, impart this policy as a student community, and how we were going to build it up from the specific context within our respective communities. We did not want it just to be on paper. We really wanted to seek to implement the mechanisms for it to become true. Obviously, that was going to be done from our own environment's context. So this advertising campaign shows the videos of youth from different parts of the region. They're telling us how we can implement the gender justice policy in um, in Colombia. The violence is a very sad reality.
The work that we have done has helped the youth within our organizations quite a lot. We look at different contexts and we try to approach many different peoples. In the case of Cuba, it has an activism towards the LGBTQ community, and we asked a comrade or a compañera to talk to us about this, about what they're doing in Cuba, what they have been applying for some time now throughout the years. So these are just examples, different initiatives that we have on a regional level so that we can apply these policies of gender justice. And through different workshops that we're also hosting, we are talking about our policies, about advocacy. The first one or the last one we had in Cuba in commemoration with a workshop that talked about new masculinities. We worked with the young population in Cuba, and we used that space to also be able to present our own justice policies of gender policy. And we also use this space to present and to connect with other organizations like the Center Martin Perkin, among other organizations. We were working with people that were trans groups or non-binary groups. And so all of these initiatives are put forward or are hosted by communities of faith. And these are practices that can be replicated all around the world. But we're not only doing that. We're not only working in our region. We want a federation. It's a universal federation. And so what we want is to be able to apply all this knowledge, this wisdom, all this, everything that we learn throughout the world. We have been in dialogue with the Universal Federation of the Student Movement in Africa and the Middle East. So those are some of the places that we see there's a bit more rejection when it comes to gender and sexual diversity. To be creating strategies so that we can actually start talking about the topic. And of course, always applying their own context, respecting their own context. But what we want is to always respect the rights of the LGBTQ community. Lastly, I want to tell you that right now in Latin America and the Caribbean, this is very relevant because we're going through a very a national neoconservative wave, because a lot of fundamentalists are not only taking power in the churches, but also in politics. Right here, we see something that I have mentioned already. These are different marches that have taken place right here. It's Argentina in one of the marches of the different sexual dissidences. And this was an anti-fascist march. We want to talk about a God, a non-binary God. And like these initiatives, we continue to create all around the region. And our objective is to be able to fight against fundamentalism, not only within the church, but also in the different states, so that we can motivate different for the application of different policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. Sorry, I was sharing my screen, so I wasn't able to monitor the chats. You still have about 10 minutes. So if anybody has a quick follow-up question for Monica, this would be a good time to ask before we move on to John's presentation. And I think there's some people who are still struggling with the interpretation toggle. I'm just looking at my messages now. Andrea,
Yes, yeah, I'm here. So if you all select more, if you don't see the interpretation right along the bottom of your screen, if you select more, which is the 3 dots, you'll see the interpretation, and then you'll have the opportunity to select English or Spanish from that menu. Again, it could be along the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on how you have Zoom set up. That should suffice. If there's still issues, you can just send a chat directly to me, to Andrea Livingston in the group chat, and we can sort that out.
Okay, so Monica, I have a question. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the process of developing your inclusive gender policy and some of the challenges that you have faced, some of the strategies that you have employed, and some of the successes that you have achieved so far.
Of course, Jane. Thank you for your question. So there have been a lot of challenges, actually. The gender justice policies was done through a methodology of popular education, participative education, and this is complicated. Why? Because first, this takes a lot of time. Our realities and in America and the Caribbean makes it that our shifts or our work shifts are quite long. And so that means that we weren't able to host meetings certain days. Sometimes we had to host at 8:30 at night, because what we wanted to do was to create an inclusive time that would be appropriate for everyone to be able to attend. That was one of the biggest challenges. But once we were in those meetings, we wanted to guarantee that every single voice was heard. That was an active process that required a lot of dialogue. And we understood that if we hadn't done it that way, if we hadn't done that way, then, rather, we were willing to take a longer period of time, as long as we allowed everyone to be heard. This was created based on the needs of our own communities, based on what we heard from them, they taught us so much. The concept of the well living comes from this dialogue, because at the beginning, we were thinking about an intersectional methodology that came from Black feminism, but to have this contact with our communities allowed us not only to talk about intersectionality, but also recognize the good living because of the political territory, because of our own bodies. So by doing it like this, through these methodologies, we affirmed ourselves. Another one of those challenges is that creating a global federation, as I mentioned before, this meant that we needed to understand that our levels of understanding when it comes to the subject are different, and our processes are not always the same. So we have to be able to talk, have a dialogue in a context where we don't go so much or too deep into the subject. So we start off working with everyone, and we make sure that we have a very clear dialogue, open dialogue, and wondering how we can actually talk without feeling like we were interfering or that we were doing what the colonizers have done, because that's something that happens when we're doing the gender justice policies, is that sometimes it could be that people might think that we are imposing. So this is a historical moment for us, because we have built this at a regional level. This is great. And these advances, if we weren't doing this, then fundamentalism would win. And so that is why it is so important for us to continue to stand, because there's so many public policies that are discriminating our communities. In some countries, they believe that, in Mexico, for example, we do have same-sex marriage, but if we're not careful, if there is a politician that comes to power that does not agree with it, then they can just change the law. And this would just generate a backward policy. So we have to be vigilant. We have to continue with the advances. We have to move forward, and we have to fight against this fundamentalism, because what they want to do is they want to be able to influence our politicians. So we have to take our actions to the streets. The fact that we are including or that we're including young people that are questioning what is going on, that they are going to the street, they're talking about the subject, and the way that they approach it is that they say, I am a Christian, I am a lesbian, I don't believe in a binary God. So that is beautiful, because we are questioning all of that, and they are too. So we also know that a lot of churches are against us, but that's okay. We will continue. And I see this as an achievement, because it allows us to continue fighting, continue raising awareness, continuing to talk about how these churches, some churches discriminate us, but at the same time, we exist within those churches, and we will continue.
Thank you so much, Monica. So if there isn't another burning question for now, if you do have a question, you're free to put it on the chat and we can circle back to it. But for right now, I would like to introduce Pastor Jhon, who's our next speaker for tonight. And whilst we're thinking about that, I just wanted to mention too that depending on some of the numbers that we get every year, Latin America still remains, one of the regions where we get a record number of violence and murder of LGBTQ plus people, particularly transgender individuals and human rights defenders. And this is not to say that this is not happening in other parts of the world. It could be that it does happen, but the data is not as accurate as in the region. But we are bearing witness to transformation for courageous faith leaders who are spearheading this work. And now I would like to introduce Pastor Jhon. I think that your testimony is very powerful. And thank you for showing us what transformative pastoral leadership can look like. So welcome, Pastor Jhon.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Christy. And thank you to the United Church of Canada. Monica, you were excellent. I loved your presentation. And I'm so happy to be able to be here to share with you, to share this space with all of you and to talk to you about how we live in Colombia. This process of inclusion, of affirmative action within the Methodist Church. What have we done? What has been our journey? What has been our challenges? What have been our achievements? What have been the lessons? And I love to know that at the United Church of Canada, you've been working on this for so many years, so many years. So we are constantly working on this subject of being more inclusive, and we know that there's always something more to do, and I'm hoping that we can share these experiences. So I am so thankful and grateful to be here with all of you. Jane, I do have a presentation, so I have some slides. Thank you very much. So what I am calling my testimony, it has been a path of faith, of resistance. It's faith and resistance. Why do I call it like that? Because faith that I have, that I live, is a constant resistance to this cis heteronormative system that tells me or imposes on me what I should be or how they think I should be, that does not allow me to have a relationship with divinity or with other people. And they even try to tell me who I can love, and that affects the church. So our path as a people, as a community, will always be a path of resistance, and it's a constant resistance. And from my experience, resistance, but that is rooted on love. So thank you so much. Now, can we continue with the slides? I want to tell you a little bit about Colombia. In Colombia, we see the influence of the Roman Catholic Church. They are the ones that most influence Colombia. And based on that, with those narratives or that discourse that's very restrictive, that has impacted our nation. And I believe that this is the same case in all of Latin America. We have our morals, that is the fruit or the product of the Roman Catholic Church, with all its prejudices, with its own paradigms.
Homosexuality and other non-normative identities within this territory were criminalized. A little bit over 30 years ago, it was still a crime in Colombia. I do not know exactly, but around 30 or 40 years ago, homosexuality was still considered a crime in Colombia. And this increased all the discrimination, all the violence towards the people that have different sexual orientations and identities. So that brought about physical and symbolic violence up until these days. Nowadays, it's still impacting us. There have been interesting progresses when it comes to LGBTQ rights in Latin America. However, the progress we've had are due thanks to the Supreme Court and activism. The Supreme Court of Justice is the one that has responded the complaints, the lawsuits that activist lawyers have put forward. And they have said, yes, the LGBTQ members have the right for adoption. They have the right to state, to get married. It's thanks to the Supreme Court of Justice. And of course, to all the movement that has been set up to fight for human rights, feminist movement, the LGBT movement, the anarchist movement, all these movements that always put pressure on the system. So I'm very, very grateful to every single person who believes that there has been change in our countries. Please, the next slide. The Methodist Church in Colombia. It's an inclusive Christian community, relatively recent. It's new. Let me say something. It was not always inclusive when it comes to sexual and gender diversity. The Methodist Church it is officially in our country since 1996. So officially it's almost been 30 years. There's something interesting. When the church was set up, it was said based on three words: a prophetic community, an ecumenical community, and an inclusive community. This began since our inception. But being prophetic means to denounce injustices and the people who oppress others within our context in the Colombian society. In, in, the inclusivity was not about that, but at that time we were going through all this wave of violence, the people, the groups that were illegal, that were against the government. So we wanted to include those, or we wanted to judge. Uh, we, we, we wanted to to invite others that were judged and other churches did not want them. People who were Black, people who were poor, displaced, people who were displaced by the violence, immigrants. That's when the Colombian Methodist Church starts to create like a community, because we believe that that's that's where the needy are, the little people of the kingdom. That's where they are. But there was a national assembly in 2006, and there was a question: what's going on? What about LGBT members? If we're an inclusive church, what about them? And dialogue started. Internal dialogues start. Ecumenical, because we we don't believe that we're the best church. On the other hand, we are just walking on Jesus' path. We believe that we are part of his body, and we want to join others to do good, as Jesus Christ said and did. Oh, could you please move on to the next slide? I would like to share with you in a very brief manner our mission and vision. The mission of the Colombian Methodist Church, as part of the body of Christ that contributes to the extension of God's kingdom, it's set on the building of inclusive communities that proclaims a new and dignified and integral life in Colombian society. We want to incarnate this. We want to embody this. We are a faith community, a dynamic. This is our vision. We want to take the different challenges and needs and goals of the parish. We want to contribute to the fullness of life in Colombia. That's what we want. That's our calling, our divine purpose. That's why it is very important in this case to have an effective response and in concrete, and taking into account the realities of LGBTQ communities. we keep on walking, we keep on walking, we keep on building the community, the ecclesiastical community that we dream about. Let me tell you, at some point, I thought that because of uh, the denomination said itself to be inclusive, in a snap of a finger, automatically, I thought that they were going to be so. That's what was going through my mind. But in reality, that did not happen because the communities are built by us, the people. People, we have different thoughts, different ways of understanding life, the world. The reading that we do of the divinity of the Bible, spirituality, the church, or what the church should be like, is also permeated by our own life story. And that's the reality. And I live in the capital city of Colombia, in Bogota. I understood that for my uh, like my farmer brother and sisters, people who did not have the same access to education as me, it was gonna take them a little longer. People who came from other church groups, other religious groups, I also understood that it was going to take them a bit longer. That's where the challenge was, and I felt that God wanted me to keep doing this, to keep working for solidarity, for respect and training. Here's I would like to share with you some key factors. We are not a we're not perfect church. We're not the most inclusive church in Latin America. But we're thinking about our actions. We're a church that is acknowledging their shortcomings and that deeply wishes to keep blessing the life of the children of God. How have we interpreted this? We welcome anybody. I don't care where you come from, the way you are, or who you love. There's a place for you here, for me and for everybody. We are committed with social justice and human rights because here in our church, we believe that when we talk about human rights, we talk about Jesus Christ's gospel. Human rights are part of the of Jesus Christ's gospel. We believe in standing up for the dignity of vulnerable peoples because the needy, those who do not treat the needy or the vulnerable people well, we have to want to wonder who are they. That's when we have to be ready for God's calling. We are working hard to share a leadership amongst men and women regardless of their orientation or gender expression. In my case, I am very grateful that a step was taken to consecrate me, to ordain me, to consecrate me as a pastor, being an openly gay person. That was a boom in Colombia. I received threats, death threats. I received hate messages through any means. A lot was said, horrible things, terrible things were said about me, that I was going to pervert the church, the children. And a lot of our mission colleagues that were part of our church, they went away because they were not willing to support a Latin American church that openly supported gender diversity. So our brothers and sisters from the north who were supporting us, the way to punish us was to say, there's no there's no more support for the Methodist Colombian Church. That was the way that they punished us. That was very hard. They were not punishing me. They were punishing men, women, children, the indigenous peoples, black people, the poor people, the displaced people. It was very, very painful. but our communities work hard to create a safe space for everybody. We're also constantly questioning the theological training. We also believe that we have to take out all those prejudice in the scriptures towards gender and sexual diversity. Some people need this answer to get this answer from the Bible. We organize workshops, lectures like this type of events. We have also held them in Colombia in order to give an answer to those who have questions for us. There's a historical event that happened at our church. In 2022, the National Assembly voted for the first time. They wanted to create the missionary line for gender and sexual diversity. That was a beautiful, wonderful thing. There have been challenges to build it up, but we keep walking, we keep going ahead and working on it. Because the historical churches that I know, that I'm aware of, I believe that amongst those churches, we are one of the few that say we are going to tackle the specific needs of the LGBT community. We're also creating protection mechanisms for the LGBTQ plus members. There are people who are part of the LGBT, straight pastors, lay people, people who know about sexual diversity, activists. In that way, all of us together, we can start building up those policies, these policies that would allow us to lay a safe path that shows that we're an inclusive church. That's all. I'll tell you. Well, let me tell you about myself. I'm Jhon Botia. I have been serving for 8 years in a very beautiful community. This community has blessed the lives of LGBTQ communities, but also their families.
We go with our voices. We go to the streets and we say, we are so proud of being gay, of being queer, and of being a Christian. And nobody has the monopoly of divinity, and that we have the right. We do have the right to worship God according to our own conscience. So in all of the marches that we have held, all of the demonstrations that we've held, we've gone out. We always bring this message. Right now, we are promoting the bill that wants to eliminate conversion therapy, and we hope that our government, that our representatives prohibit these horrible practices. We are really, really motivated to make sure that we prohibit all of this. When a church calls itself an inclusive church, an affirmative church, then what we are doing is we're helping others heal. And so I am so happy to see that the United Church is doing that, because what you're doing, you're saving lives, you're healing lives. You're liberating the lives, not only for the LGBTQ communities, but also their families, because the families are also rejected. The children, the grandmothers, the aunts and the uncles, they are all rejected. And so it's so good that they can find this beautiful space in your church. So this is a little bit of what we have done in our community. We continue to move forward, working with everyone. In the 2023 Pride March, our theme or our message rather, for for society in Bogota is let's acknowledge the harm done by the church. And let's remind everyone that God does not hate, God loves. That was our message. That is all. Thank you so much for the time that you gave me.
Sorry, I'm just popping in here as manning the chat here, but there was some information passed about the vote. Could you explain that again? There was a few people who didn't catch the vote that was happening, if you could.
The National Assembly.
Our church voted in a national assembly. So a mission line, a telephone line would be created to tend to the needs of the LGBTQ community. So we voted to create a very specific ministry for the people, for the LGBTQ community. That is what we voted for in the National Assembly.
Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jhon, for sharing that. Truly, it's an amazing testimony. So quickly before I open it up to question and answer, I wanted to share that, what you shared with us about when your church became affirming. There was a split, and speaking from experience of the United Church, that this has also happened in the United Church. So just wondering if you can speak a little bit about how the church is navigating the tensions of affirming theology or the tensions of being an affirming community.
Well, you know what has worked for us? We do not need to think the same, but we need to love each other nonetheless. We urgently need to love everyone, even if I don't understand, even if I don't have the answer. We need to love all of our brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Jhon. Christy, do you have any additions before we ask for folks if they have any questions right now before the breakout session?
Yeah, I mean, I have lots of questions, but I'll try and restrain myself. I guess just maybe maybe Jhon, if you can give folks an idea of what it would be like to attend your church service on a Sunday morning. I've had that privilege. What kind of space have you tried to create on a Sunday morning for folks?
Thank you for asking that, Christy. Well, they are colorful, I can tell you that. They are full of love, vibrant. We love coffee too. So 1 hour before the service, everybody starts arriving. They all get to the church because they love the kitchen. They love it that in the kitchen they can get some coffee, some tea, and everyone starts sharing, talking about what they have done during the week, because Bogota is such a big city and there's only 2 Methodist church. There's really not a lot of space for people to get together because everybody's so busy. So they arrive early, they share coffee. We hear a lot of laughter, a lot of hugs. Sometimes we see some people crying because of the situation in the capital. The situation is difficult. But after that, when service begins, the Sunday service, it is full of Latin American flavor with a lot of drums, guitar, electric guitar, the bass. We love to be able to lift our arms and worship God freely. Oh, we move our hands this way. We're so us, so us. And then we let go of all of the feathers. We throw out all of our feathers because we are free. We are free in the presence of God, and we are ourselves. And we can sing without anybody judging us. We can move whichever way we want. We can hug each other. In Latin America, we kiss each other on the cheek, we hug each other. So as we are worshiping, all of this is going on as well. Because Christian brothers and sisters, a lot of spaces deny us the opportunity or the right to be ourselves. So these spaces, these specific places allow us to experience it, to live it, to breathe it. So it's a beautiful experience.
That is so beautiful. I definitely will have to make a point to come and visit your church at some point. So I have a couple of minutes left for anybody who has a question or a comment before we go into the breakout sessions in a minute. You can raise your hand, or if I can see you on the screen, for anybody who has a question. Okay. All right. If not, then I can take advantage and we have a little bit more time. Oh, Caroline.
Hola, me llamo Carolina.
Hello, my name is Carolina.
Mi vida, Ricardo, es mi esposa. Es venezolano.
My partner is from Venezuela.
That's all the Spanish I have. That and mi corazón de melón. Gracias por los presentaciones. This is so beautiful and important to me. I live in a small town in Ontario, Canada. My husband is part of the community, the LGBT community. We met and attended Metropolitan Community Church in Toronto, which is a queer church started by a priest that was queer, that was forced out of their original church. And it was wonderful. Now we are at a United Church in our small rural town, and it is the most inclusive of the churches in town. We are working towards becoming affirming. So we're 3 years into our affirming journey. And what I think we're struggling is many things, but with the affirming part, it's we're welcoming enough, we're inclusive enough, it's the memberships, maybe things that they don't understand what it would mean to be more inclusive and more affirming. They think they're doing enough, whereas our affirm committee doesn't necessarily feel that confident yet to take the next step, which is doing a vote to become an affirming ministry. So what would be your recommendations on, or what would you say to people that say, we're welcoming enough, we're welcoming, we're kind, we're good people enough, but that don't necessarily have experience with queer community? And I don't really know what I'm asking. We're struggling to move forward.
Monica, do you want to say something? Jhon, you go and then I will continue. Carolina, I would like to say to you something. I wish I had a better answer, an answer that gives you so much hope. But church, the life in church is always, or it's constantly tense. It's always tense. There's always going to be tension, because if we were in an area that was completely free of questions, where we had all of the answers, then really what we have is a sect. That's what we would have, a sect, correct? So one of the things that I have learned is that Christian life is always going to bring us, or always going to have us in an area that is full of tension, where we have a lot of questions. So the first thing we need to do is recognize, acknowledge that we can always improve. There's always room for improvement. There's always a possibility to listen, to love more. And if we are all thinking that way, if we are all within that same thought, then we can start creating, not seeing the church as something that is a finished product, but something that continues moving. Let's not look at church as something that is finished, done, because the Spirit of God continues to manifest itself in a very, very diverse and different ways. And we've seen this throughout 2 million years. The church is alive. It's a living body, and therefore it continues to evolve. I know. I wish the church could do so much more. Yes. And we also have our historical moments. We are also subject to the realities of our own country, of our own culture. And I ask God for help. Let's ask God for help, so that we can see each other with love, rooted in love and divinity. Your question is a very good question. And I think that we all have a responsibility. A lot of the time, it is thought that those that have to be at the forefront of inclusive spaces, or those that have to have the LGBTQ community, are the people that are actually part of the LGBTQ community. But it is also very important that it is not our fight. It's not only our struggle, that we should also be supported, standing side by other people that share our struggle, that share our position. So for me, when I talk about churches, I don't necessarily think about four walls. I don't think about four walls or a tradition. I would love to know what the first communities in Christianity felt. We can create meetings. We can create meetings just like these. Just like these. Remember, God says that if there's more than one person together, I will be there. I will be there with you. So whenever we think about church, what do we mean? We have to rethink this. What are these sacred spaces? Other communities, other churches, other people can come with us and support us, and collectively we can create a safer and better space.
Thank you, Jhon and Monica. Kara, I think I'll come back to your question after our breakout sessions. But for right now, I would like to invite you to go into a little breakout room, get to know each other who's on the call, and to help guide your conversations. We had these two very interesting questions. Each of the group is going to have 15 minutes. And we are asking you, based on what you have heard tonight, what surprised you, what challenged you, what resonated with you, and what can you in your church community or in your church do to stand in solidarity with movements for LGBTQ plus justice in Latin America in this context? And I think Monica has given us a little bit of a tidbit of an answer about how we can be supportive in solidarity. So we are going to put you in small groups, 15 minutes each. You can assign somebody to come back and report to us interesting things that stood out in your conversation, and we can share that as we head out to close the conversation for tonight. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I know there's never enough time in the breakout rooms when the conversations are so good, but thank you so much. Before I invite each of the groups to give me a summary, I wanted to go back to Karag's question, and they were asking Monica and Jhon that you talked about the process is taking a long time, and Karag was curious about whether you have any advice about how LGBTQ plus people can take care of ourselves as we engage in dialogue with people who do not support our rights, and how do we continue these conversations in a good way? Do you have any thoughts about that? Self-care.
Jane, can you please repeat the question, please? We have a problem with the interpretation.
Yeah,
Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, and it's also on the chat. Karak was asking that you both talked about processes of affirming taking so long, taking a bit of time, and they were curious about if you have any advice about how LGBTQ plus people can take care of ourselves as we engage in dialogue with people who do not support our rights, and how do we continue these conversations in a good way?
Okay, perfect. The one that was on the chat. Now I understand. Well, listen, to me, self-care is very important. Regardless of whatever space we're in, we have to prioritize what's going on in our body, in our experiences, but not only on a personal level, but more broadly. Many times there are spaces, well, saying that you're LGBTQ and Christian, you go to places that are not necessarily safe, like by doing that. Regardless of many things, like when you come out as such, that's hard for the world. But there are traditional, regardless of traditional ways that they see the LGBTQ people, we have to take care of ourselves. We require times to care of ourselves. Taking care of ourselves becomes the biggest resistance movement from the outside. Everybody's telling you that your own existence is unworthy or is not acceptable. So creating helpful communities, so communities of solidarity, where you can express everything that you're going through, your body's going through, is very important, because you will always be exposed. Like when you make yourself known, you will be exposed. You will end up being exposed. That exposure has pros and cons. The pros, you can help more people that are going through the same and that are going through similar problems. Like the disadvantages hurt many times, but safe places are necessary to deal with those issues. You have to prioritize which spaces are worthy, are good for you, and spaces that will give you a different perspective. Personally, I do not go to meetings of Pentecostal churches, because I know that's going to harm my body, that's going to harm all the process that I have been doing for the past 15 years. Some people that will feel ready to do so. In my case, I commend them. But you have to prioritize what is it that you need. How much strength do you have at a certain point to do things? We have to understand that we're not alone. We have other support networks. Like maybe I'm not ready, and these people can welcome me and can help me out to realize that this is collective.
Thank you, Monica. Jhon, in 1 minute before we hear from the groups.
Throughout my faith journey, I've discovered that leaving is an option when I feel that I have been harmed, and that's totally valid. To look for other spaces also, spaces that are safe, that are welcoming, to look for a support group. That's also valid. It's valid that when you feel stronger, to return and be the resistance to start the change. And it is valid that you find a new community that accepts you. Because following what Monica said, I agree a lot with her. First, my emotional well-being, my psychological, emotional, and spiritual well-being comes first.
Thank you so much. I love that response too. So in the few minutes that we have, so group one, what stood out for you that you want to share for the questions in just a few minutes that we have left? What stood out for you in the conversation? What challenges are you experiencing? And what can you, as a church community, do to stand in solidarity with our global partners? Anybody from group one? Group two? Anybody want to share?
No, para ser honestos, no atajamos las preguntas, para ser muy honestos.
But
Hablamos sobre nuestras experiencias y cómo trabajamos conjuntamente, lo cual fue importante.
Group 3 and 4?
El grupo 3 y 4.
I just wanted to stop for a second.
Yo
I think
solo
you're on the
quería
wrong.
I think
detenerme por
You're
un
on the wrong
momento.
channel.
channels.
Yeah, you're on the wrong channel. So I just wanted to stop for a second. You're speaking Spanish on the English. Thank you.
Group
I
3
was
and
in group
4?
4. I was in group 4.
Yes.
We talked about kind of resonating with the description of right-wing political groups kind of becoming more powerful and more vocal, and that we see that as well in Canada and are concerned about that and protecting the gains that we have made in rights for the Two-Spirit LGBTQ+ community. And we talked quite a bit about what Caroline had brought up too, of that while our wonderful speakers were very complimentary about how long the United Church has been working for equality, that sometimes that has become a problem for us when congregations did a lot of work 20 years ago around especially the issue of legalizing same-sex marriage in Canada, but have not stayed abreast of changes in how we talk about and celebrate diverse gender identities. And some of our congregations need to go back to work, and that can be a difficult message for them to hear. And then on the topic of what to do going forward, we were really moved by what Jhon said about how when he was ordained, partners withdrew their support, and thinking about how that is a form of colonialism when wealthy churches in the north use their money to try to influence the direction other denominations and churches, and how could we in the United Church share our resources in a way that helps folks to make their own decisions and to support their church in its natural development.
Thank you, Heather. So conscious of the time, so I quickly wanted to share as we come to a close, a very quick call to action for everybody who was able to join us and what we're asking our communities of faith to do. We'll be sharing with you a letter writing campaign that's coming this week, a letter writing campaign to your elected representatives. Because Pride 2025 coincides with the newly elected federal government, we want to make sure that the government of Canada hears loudly that protecting 2S LGBTQ+ people's rights around the world, not just in Canada, is a key priority. So that's coming. And please continue to join us in this webinar series. We have another one next Tuesday with the refugee team. And the last week of the month, on the 27th, we'll be sharing the space with ecumenical partners from United Church of Christ in the US and the Presbyterian Church of Canada to talk about the growing concerns and the backlash on LGBTQ+ folks. As you can see, what has been happening in the global South that has been affected primarily by the actions of the global North. So please continue joining us and amplifying global queer Christian voices. And we are so glad, and it was such a pleasure to hear from Monica and Jhon today. Christy will do the closing for us in respect of time.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much, Jane. Also, just want to thank, just before we go, our amazing translators in the background, Anna and Maria. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here this evening and helping to create this space. And just want to thank also Monica and Jhon for their presence, their leadership, their wisdom, and sharing from the heart. Deeply want to appreciate that. It is a privilege for us as the United Church of Canada to have you accompany us as partners as we continue to walk into our deep commitment to daring justice and commitment to continue on our journey for justice within our own church and in Canada for LGBTQS, LGBTQIA communities in this full diversity in Canada. So thank you for continuing to walk with us on that journey. And thank you for bringing the struggles and the voices and the richness of your own testimonies and that of your own organizations into the space today. I'll just end with a very short prayer because I know we're just past time. And so if we can just, whatever you need to do, put your feet on the ground, take a breath, and just reflect on the richness of this moment. Thank you, Creator, for being with us in this space this evening, for allowing us to glimpse and appreciate and give thanks for the diversity, the richness of your divinity that we are called to live into in our communities, in our countries, and in our world. May we go forward to live into that full call in its prophetic nature, in its ecumenical nature, and in its deep inclusive nature. May those who are leading the way and those who are accompanying the way be strengthened, be blessed with safe, secure spaces, be lifted up with the wings of angels. We give you thanks for all those who went before, and all those who go ahead, and all those who walk along beside. Amen.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to having you again next week and the week after that as we continue this webinar series. So thank you, everybody. Much appreciated. And thank you so much, Monica and Jhon. And we hope to have you again sometime soon.